As we mark the Jewish festival of Sukkot, Tabernacles, a time of dwelling in temporary shelters and reflecting on our ancestors' displacement, we are reminded of our moral duty to welcome and protect the stranger. Sukkot invites us to open our homes, share meals, and reflect on the fragility and also on the importance of having a place to call home. We are called not just to admit others, but to embrace them with compassion and dignity. This policy does neither. I am therefore delighted to host today's event together with our partner organization and to introduce our guest speakers for today. Madeline, a speaker by experience for freedom from torture. Zoe Bantleman, a barrister and legal director of the Immigration Law Practitioners Association in London and the editor of Journal of Immigration, Asylum and Nationality Law. And the Right Reverend Dr. Guli Francis Decky, Bishop of Chelmsford, a member of the Lord's Spiritual in the House of Lords. Each speaker will speak for about 15 minutes, and I know, Rebecca, you'll do further introductions, after which we will open the floor and the mic up for questions from the audience. So please keep those till the end. And as you've probably noted, this event is recorded. I would first like to start by inviting David Mason, the Executive Director of HIAS+JCORE, to introduce the organization and the work that you do.
Thank you, Mia. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone here. And thank you, obviously, to all our speakers. I'm the Executive Director of HIAS+JCORE, and we work to develop a Jewish response to support refugees and asylum seekers in the UK. We do that based on Jewish values, and we do it in three ways: through lobbying for policy change and improved policy, for fair deal for refugees and asylum seekers, to develop and improve narratives within Jewish communities around refugee and asylum. And we have a support project where we support young unaccompanied asylum seekers through befriending, through hardship fund, through events and through casework, which is a wonderful program, which is really at the core of our work. Now, obviously, the concept of citizenship has changed radically over time, as the concept of the nation state has done as well. In fact, the nation state is a relatively modern concept, according to many ethnologists. But the Torah, the core Jewish text, still refers to the word Ezrach, which is today used as the word for citizen. In fact, when the Torah talks about Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish year, it says, "All shall rest, the citizen and the stranger who dwells amongst you." Now, of course, this does separate out into two categories, but I would say that this is an inclusive model of membership. In fact, there are two ways this could be understood. One, well, we're told elsewhere in the Torah, right, in the 5 books of Moses, you should love the stranger as you were strangers in Egypt. There is a famous French commentator who mentions that the stranger is one coming from a strange place, i.e., from another land. So we are saying here that there will be people who have lived for a long time, and there will be people who have a need to come, to be in a place and come from somewhere else. And they are both a core part of the community. I suppose the stranger becomes a citizen, and new strangers come in time who themselves become citizens. Another way of understanding this is reconversion. A person can convert to Judaism, and they then become a full part of the community, even though they were not born a Jewish person. The path to religious citizenship is, of course, open to them. This, again, is a very inclusive model of understanding membership and citizenship of the body from a Jewish perspective. Of course, there's another approach here, that the founding story of the Jewish people itself is through rejection from citizenship, so to speak, in Egypt. As I mentioned above, the love for the stranger that we are commanded in is considered connected to, because linked to the experience that we had as a people in Egypt. Our strangeness in Egypt was a separation, a discrimination against, being rejected from joining the Egyptian community at the time, and eventually made to be a slave caste that built Egypt's glory without any hope, any mobility. The experience of slavery in Egypt creates a sensitivity and a sense of solidarity with those who suffer and are excluded. It means that the rejection of people from citizenship for coming here due to suffering and persecution is a very un-Jewish approach indeed. We're in fact now, as Mia mentioned, in the festival of Sukkot, the Tabernacles Festival, where many families build a sukkah booth, a hut in their garden, on their balcony, on their roof if they can. And this reminds us of the journey of fleeing persecution in Egypt for the Jewish people. The reason we build the booth, we're told in the Torah, is because of the journey of the Jewish people. This is their founding moment, right, for the people. The foundation of the Jewish nation was as refugees. And we remember that through building our vulnerable, flimsy hut. And finally, one of the famous Spanish scholars, Maimonides, who lived in Spain, as I've said, in Spain, of course, in the 12th century, explains that if someone wants to marry, we need to check if they're Jewish, like we'd like to. And when we do that, we inquire this: are they merciful, humble, and kind? No documentation is needed, according to Maimonides, but are they merciful, humble, and kind? So that is the Jewish essence right there in 3 words. That's what it should be. And this change the citizenship rules for those who come here regularly certainly does not meet those very universal, but here also Jewish criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, David. While I introduced myself, I didn't introduce Rene Cassin. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that Rene Cassin does and how we fit within this sector and this idea of human rights work, human rights compassion, and Jewish heritage. So like I introduced myself, I'm Mia, the Executive Director of Rene Cassin. We work to promote and protect universal rights in the UK by drawing on Jewish teaching, Jewish values, and Jewish experience, and to catalyze the British Jewish community's engagement with fundamental human rights and freedoms. We work within the Jewish community in the UK by building support for human rights values among British Jews, and in the wider community by bringing the authority of a Jewish perspective on issues that resonate with Jewish experience. We believe that as survivors of intolerance, discrimination, and persecution, and as experts by experience who understand the need for empathy and solidarity, the Jewish community has a uniquely authoritative voice in speaking out when other minority groups in the UK face discrimination, marginalization, and hate. We draw inspiration and sense of commitment from our namesake, Monsieur Rene Cassin, the principal co-drafter of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, drafted in the aftermath of the Holocaust, and who is often described as the father of the modern human rights framework. We make the case for human rights as a response to the Holocaust by telling the lineage story of the modern framework, and we emphasize the importance of allyship, of compassion, and of respect. Much of our advocacy centers on the rights of refugees and asylum seekers in the UK. We challenge policies that criminalize those fleeing danger, and we speak out when international legal protections, that same legal framework that our namesake helped shape and develop, many of which were shaped in response, are undermined. One of our key campaigns over many years now is promoting a compassionate and just asylum system. We focus on two specific issues: the UK's immigration detention system and the critical need for safe and legal routes for refugees to arrive in the UK. Together with partners like HIAS+JCORE, rabbis, young people, and communion leaders, but also alongside sector partners like the Detention Forum and Women for Refugee Women and many others, we advocate for a fair domestic protection system for refugees. This means introducing a time limit on immigration detention and for alternatives to immigration detention that don't include barbed institutions or barracks, but actually include a holistic support system for an embracing community. And we also call for the provision of more safe and legal routes for those seeking asylum in the UK, just like the 1939 Kinder Transport Scheme, the 1956 refugee scheme for those fleeing Hungary, or schemes that provided refuge for Jews from Egypt and Iraq. Today's refugees shouldn't have to use irregular and life-threatening routes to reach safety and shelter in the UK. But our work is not only limited to legal advocacy. We build bridges across communities, standing in solidarity with victims of modern-day slavery, Roma and Gypsy and traveller communities in the UK, and others facing systemic injustice. We convene Jewish organizations to embed human rights into everyday practice, from practical care to youth education, and we train young leaders to become tomorrow's human rights advocates. Our recent collaboration with HIAS+JCORE and over 25 Jewish communal rabbis on the citizenship ban is an example of our commitment to international law, our Jewish heritage, and the legacy of Monsieur Cassin. You'll see that I didn't talk about international law in detail because I think that is best left to the experts on our panel today. So I would like to invite Zoe Bantleman, please, to talk about the domestic and international law implications of these recent guidelines introduced.
Thank you, Mia, and good afternoon, everyone. Please forgive and bear with me because I've come down with one of those COVID bugs that are flying around at the moment and seem to have contracted quite a bad cough, and my voice is sort of coming and going sporadically, so please bear with me. Yeah, my own interest in this area has come from my years of practicing as a barrister in this area of law. For years, I helped refugees and others apply for citizenship in this country and also to fight the refusals of citizenship. But in more recent years, I've also moved into the advocacy, policy, and research space, looking at this simple and fundamental issue that we're talking about today of how we extend hospitality and solidarity to the foreigner with whom we share this common humanity, but who might be unknowably different to us, who might have had life experiences that we simply cannot fathom. How do we make them feel belonging and inclusion in our society so that we may shape and learn from one another? How do we ensure that our rules are as close to fair as they can be? And this seems to me to be the fundamental question at the heart of what we want to speak about today. On a personal note, my own family is a bit like this, from different corners of the globe, different color passports, and it's no easy task to find a place where we can all live together. And we had to jump through legal and costly hurdles to even make our lives here. So I know how sudden shifts in policy, sudden announcements of yet more barriers to gaining citizenship and to settlement can harm confidence in the legal system that we've all chosen to put our faith in by choosing to live here. And yet, with all of my privilege, I have no personal, only familial experience of how that difficulty is compounded when the place you come from is a place where you will face harm if you were to return. And that's exactly the position of the refugee. They're seeking to belong here, and they cannot return to their home country and belong there. And we have recognized that they need to be given protection here. Nevertheless, on the 10th of February this year, which was the same day that the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill was read for a second time in the House of Commons, an astounding change was made to the government's guidance on citizenship. We had just begun to celebrate the Border Security Bill's proposed repeal of the Safety of Rwanda Act and large parts of the Illegal Migration Act, including the citizenship ban, which initially applied to all of those who irregularly arrived here on or after the 7th of March 2023. Only to then hear on the 10th of February this year that now all individuals who entered or arrived here through irregular means or having made a dangerous journey to seek refuge here would normally be forever barred from being granted citizenship because they would not be considered to meet the good character requirement. This would be the case even if they had no other safe routes to reach the UK, with the UK having almost no humanitarian pathways for people to come that are not nationality specific, so like for Ukraine and Afghanistan and Hong Kong. People fleeing persecution and seeking sanctuary often, we know, don't have time to obtain papers. They're compelled to arrive and enter and be present in countries irregularly. And this is a premise and an understanding upon which our entire international legal protection regime was built. Nevertheless, the change in guidance came into force immediately, and it was a change to guidance rather than one to a domestic law that was passed by Parliament, which means it didn't have the parliamentary scrutiny that other bills that pass through Parliament have, that other changes to our legal system so fundamental have. In many ways, this change has seemed more punitive than the Illegal Migration Act, as it would apply to people who arrived here years, decades before the guidance recently changed. Many had been waiting until 10 years had passed since they entered or arrived before they applied for citizenship, but they were caught out just before they reached their 10th year or just before they managed to save the naturalization fees, now more than £1,700. At the Immigration Law Practitioners Association, we've now seen and heard of many cases of the good character change being punitively applied in a blanket manner, even to people who have arrived regularly on visas, even to people who claim asylum immediately after they arrive. We've seen the change in guidance applied to people who fell out of status years after their arrival, so who held valid visas for years, who never arrived or entered irregularly, and who have waited for 10 years since their breach of our laws before applying for citizenship. So while there is discretion in this good character guidance, and while there is still a power to grant people citizenship, it seems that it's not being used fairly or properly. And all of this has real implications on the ground for the tens of thousands of refugees who are not yet British citizens. First, it means that many refugees and other migrants will be denied the benefits, inclusion, and belonging that citizenship can help bring. The right to vote and stand for election, the right to be free to live in and to come and go into and from the UK, freedom from detention and deportation, travel benefits and consular services, the ability to work, for the civil service, a passport if they can't obtain one from their home country. Instead, they may live in a constant fear that their status will be stripped away from them if there's a change in policy or change in government, even if under the government's new plans they can show that they have earned their settlement, they may still be barred from citizenship. Many years ago, in the origins of totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt expressed her concern about this exact point, about the need to have the right to have rights, that to have one's human rights secured and acknowledged, one would need to belong to a nation state. And without that citizenship and that belonging in that political community, what we thought would be inalienable human rights would actually be rendered alienable. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing here by barring refugees from citizenship. The second real impact that all of this has on the ground is that the change means the risk of applying for citizenship is all the greater. People have to save more than £1,500, which won't be refunded if they're refused. There's no appeal, only a naturalisation review, which costs hundreds of pounds sterling more, and a costly and lengthy judicial review to challenge refusal in the courts. Most people can't afford to take that risk and to throw away money that would otherwise be spent on supporting their family. Other than wide-ranging discretion, there are no clear safeguards to ensure compliance with international law and the guidance. For children, the guidance says that it will normally be appropriate to disregard immigration breaches if it's accepted that this was outside of their control. And the minister has said in response to questions that given illegal entry is normally considered outside a child's control, most children would not be held accountable for their immigration breach. But this is not stated anywhere on the face of the guidance, so most children don't know that they won't be held accountable. As for all others, all adults, the previous minister wrote to me that the Secretary of State may choose to apply discretion to grant citizenship on an exceptional basis where there are particularly exceptional, compelling, or mitigating circumstances, and where necessary to comply with our international obligations. But in my opinion, this may simply is not good enough. It risks breaching the very international laws which Mia has spoken about, which were necessary to prevent the scourge of war or the Holocaust from being repeated, by instead penalizing refugees and stateless persons by failing to facilitate their assimilation and naturalization, contrary to the UN conventions relating to refugees and stateless persons from 1951 and 1954. By discriminating without objective and reasonable justification, and by failing to uphold the best interests of children and their right to acquire nationality. So we have helped Bishop Guli with an amendment that will be debated this coming Monday. It's minimal, to say the least, to try to create a platform for building consensus and change, but it turns the government's may into a must. The good character requirement must not be applied in a manner that's contrary to the UK's obligations under international law. The change must not be wielded to refuse citizenship to people who entered or arrived as children. And the requirement must only apply to those who came at a time when it was published, not to those who arrived decades ago, who could not have known the impact their irregular entry or arrival would have on the rest of their life, who couldn't have been deterred by this change in policy if that's the real intention behind the amendment, and who this policy now only serves to punish. So I hope that that will be a helpful platform to have some debate in the House of Lords, and that we can convince the government, if not through policy advocacy, then through the ongoing cases in the courts, to accept that the guidance must be changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you for outlining the details. And you mentioned that these guidelines will affect tens of thousands of refugees in the UK. All it takes is one story and one case, and that's why I'm really delighted and very thankful, Madeline, for you agreeing to join us today. Madeline, sorry. Speaker by experience, I'll let you tell your story, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Richard. Hi, everybody. My name is Madeline. I am a member of a One Strong Voice. I have been living in UK since end of the 2006. I am also a mother of 3 children. I'm very grateful that this country has given me many safety and a chance to rebuild my life and rebuild my life for myself and my family. As a person who came to seek safety in the UK, I remember when I were told about the citizenship ban policy. When introducing in 2025, we learned how the Home Office changed its guidance on assessing the good character that they were going to consider it for people who apply for citizenship. I was personally worried about it, because I'm not yet a citizen and I hope to apply when I am ready. Everyone in our network were worried. We have been campaigning against this policy. Myself, I participate on this campaign to the policy that is sadly in place. And when we seek a safety obtaining citizen in the final, obtaining citizenship is the final reassurance that you are permanently accepted in this country and giving you the closure that you need, that you belong to the safe place. I have believed I am a good person. I'm not committing any crime or causing any trouble. I contribute to my community. I have paid tax, but the government just want to judge people like me on the basis of how we arrive in the UK. We are being penalized for trying to get to safety. I want to talk about what is worrying me, the immigration control and visa restriction is limiting living to remain mean you must regularly renew your visa, which is costly and stressful. Without citizen, your stay is not guaranteed long term. Lack of assurance, immigration policy can change, creating stress about future status as a work and career limitation. Some jobs, especially in government or defense, are restricting to citizens. Just citizens are allowed to apply on this kind of position. And employer requests a share code to candidate with indefinite leave remain. What is worrying me in this point is that one day you can go and apply for your share code for your employer. They can tell you that your share code, as you are not eligible anymore to share to apply for the share code. That is very stressful when I think about it. And in point of health and healthcare access, no citizen must pay an immigration health surcharge to use the NHS. And we know many refugees suffer from poverty and have a low income job, and some of them they don't have anything. And emergency care is available. NHS access will be limited unless you pay a IHS or have a private insurance. When we go to the point of housing and cost living, you may not qualify for housing support, benefits, or social service. Some people become homeless because of that. Some landlords may hesitate to rent to the non-citizen because they are not trustworthy. Social, emotional, and personal challenge. Feeling of insecurity or not belonging, especially if you can't vote or access his public support. Like myself, since I'm in this country, I never have a chance to vote which part or which person I really like. And without citizen, you may feel excluding from full participation in society. Traveling is harder without a British passport, and you may face visa issue when visiting other countries. Like myself, I have 3 children, like I said before. My children, all of them, they are British, and me, I don't have a British citizen. And there is a time we think going somewhere or travel, like going in holiday, but we can't do it because I need to apply for visa. Most of the time, you don't have a place of appointment, or when you get appointment, you apply, they refuse your application. And you might experience uncertainty about uncertain about your future, especially if a law change or your visa is denied. Long-term stability. You can't vote in general emotion unless you are Commonwealth citizen or Irish. Like I said before, I never have a chance to vote, and I feel like I'm not feeling belonging in this country because I don't have this right to vote. And you always live with a feeling of no belonging and knowing that you are not accepted, and this is not a good feeling for everybody. I have a chance to talk about, even in my network. We feel like we feel that feeling. Before I finish, I just wish to say that this policy is not fair and will target a group nationality. There are not many safe and legal routes on this route, and those exist are not accessible for everyone. People do want the need to get to safety, And this has nothing to do with the character. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeline, not only for being so open and sincere, sharing also some of your fears. I hope I'm saying it on behalf of everyone on screen and in the audience. You do belong. You are accepted. And actually, Bishop Guli and your colleagues and the fantastic work that you do are designed to ensure, Madeline, that you will be accepted. You will be able to vote and you won't face any of the challenges. So Bishop Guli, I hope that was a good segue for you to talk about the fantastic work and the amendment that you're doing to help people like Madeline.
Thank you very much indeed for your introduction. It's very, very good to be here with you. If I may, as a Christian leader in the Church of England, I just wanted to start briefly with a message of solidarity to the whole Jewish community following the appalling attacks in the Manchester area on the Manchester synagogue on Yom Kippur, and to say how much I want to reaffirm the right of all people of faith to be able to worship and congregate together without fear of attack. And I very much hope that news of the ceasefire deal in Gaza will bring comfort and relief to people there in that region, but also to Jewish people across the world. It's very, very good to be here with you this afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. So I've been asked to speak on why I chose to sponsor an amendment on the ban on citizenship for refugees who arrive via an irregular route, and why I'd like to see the changes to the good character guidance reversed. So let me start with the personal, if I may. I can't remember much about becoming a British citizen. I arrived in the UK as a refugee from Iran in 1980 when I was just 13 years old. And I was given citizenship 3 or 4 years later, by which time I was actually already well on the way to feeling integrated, thanks to receiving opportunities and encouragement and growing up at a time when the UK was so much more welcoming to asylum seekers. But I don't think at that age I really completely understood the enormity of receiving citizenship. Now I speak as a diocesan bishop who sits in the House of Lords, and I'm very conscious of the opportunities that I was blessed with and the immense privilege that it's been for me to be able to explore my vocation, to serve and to lead in the church and the wider community as a fully accepted member of British society. I'm aware that without British citizenship, this journey would not have been possible for me. And so that's not a gift that I want closed off for other refugees. So many have similar stories of lives rebuilt here in the UK. And it saddens me deeply to think not only what they may never have the opportunity for, but also that we too could miss out on, I don't know, the next Mo Farah, Judith Kerr, or indeed my inspiring colleague in the House of Lords, Lord Alf Dubs. These people have become British citizens and alongside so many others have contributed fully to our shared life. The changes to the good character guidance, in effect, make the how of a person's travel to the UK a determining factor in their character assessment, not the why. The question about why they were seeking sanctuary and why they were given it. This represents a fundamental cultural shift, and it's a factor I believe bears no correlation to someone's moral character, their worth, their value, or indeed the contribution that they're going to go on to make within their families, their neighbourhoods, more widely in the world of work and so on. So the amendment that I've tabled to the Border Security Bill provides us with the opportunity, as you've heard, particularly from Zoe, I think, to discuss this shift and to explore the government's reasoning behind the change that they're proposing. Clauses 38 and 39 of the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill, in fact, repeal the ban on British citizenship contained in the Illegal Migration Act of 2023. But changes to the good character guidance reinstated the ban, crucially without any debate, and regardless even of the time that's elapsed since a person's arrival in this country. Ministers have said that they may choose to apply discretion. Again, we've heard use of the language may choose to apply discretion in granting citizenship on an exceptional basis, where there are particularly compelling or mitigating circumstances, and where necessary to comply with our international obligations. As Zoe said, my amendment simply turns this may into a must. And importantly, it guarantees that children will have their irregular entry or arrival disregarded, because children cannot be blamed for something that was beyond their control. And that's a really, really important point. I hope that the minister will be able to accept this point, as the current wording of the bill is clearly at odds with the best interests of the child. As Baroness Brenda Hale said in the Supreme Court, and I quote, "It would be wrong in principle to devalue what was in their best interests by something for which they could in no way be held to be responsible." This relates to children, of course. So now let me turn to other reasons why I pursued this amendment. And let me at this point, acknowledge that I am, of course, indebted to the work of the whole sector, the ILPA, in drafting the amendment, as well as to my co-signatories, Baroness Lister, Lord German, and Lord Kerr. And in fact, Baroness Lister is kindly going to be introducing the amendment in the chamber next week, because unfortunately I'm not able to be present, and I'm very grateful to her. I was encouraged by the words of the Prime Minister last week when he acknowledged and celebrated the contribution migrants have made and continue to make in our society. And I trust that that indicates an intention to build a stronger, more cohesive society together. But this will require a consistent and comprehensive integration strategy, and denying citizenship to some appears to work against this very goal. Preventing families who've been granted refugee status the opportunity to become full members of British society just on the basis of their entry to the UK will needlessly harm and work against integration. So I want to ask, what will be the long-term impact of segregating refugees and British citizens in this manner, especially at a time when some seek shamelessly to exploit division and employ harmful rhetoric to other asylum seekers and refugees? As I've said, a sense of security and belonging has been a vitally important aspect of my life as a British citizen. The knowledge that I have certain rights has also brought with it an awareness of my responsibilities to contribute and play my part to the best of my ability. Citizenship allowed me to move from being an outsider to becoming an insider of sorts, someone who would always be shaped by the experiences that brought me to this country, who's still very aware of my roots and my identity as an Iranian, but who's been granted a new home and a chance to flourish and give something back. We've heard something of the importance of all this from Madeline already, but let me quote Farzad, also from Iran, who's described what he feels at the prospect of never becoming a British citizen under this new rule. He says, "When I heard the news, it was like being hit with a bucket of cold water. Now I feel like no matter how hard I try, I'm never really going to be part of this society. It's like I'll always be an outsider who's been added on but doesn't truly belong. I also feel this constant sense of insecurity, like at any moment my status could be compromised." We cannot confine individuals to this terrible limbo, placing barriers to their full inclusion. It'll be to the detriment of the refugees themselves, their sense of well-being and belonging, but also detrimental to British society. The ban on citizenship will also mean that many of those granted refugee status won't be able to vote in the country where they live and work and where their children go to school, as we've heard from Madeline. They'll have no say in the democracy to which they contribute and in which they pay taxes. I want also to comment briefly on the lack of formal pathways or sanctioned routes for travelling to the UK to claim asylum, because it's this issue that's the backdrop to what we're discussing today. Safe routes can never fully do away with a functioning territorial system of asylum, but denying someone citizenship without providing an alternative to irregular travel appears to be punitive and cruel. And in any case, there's no evidence that the ban will actually prevent irregular migration. We mustn't forget that it's not possible to apply for asylum unless you're physically present here in the UK. And currently, the lack of safe routes means that for some, the only alternative is to make dangerous journeys. Finally, as the amendment makes clear, the denial of citizenship to refugees or stateless persons due to mode of entry potentially breaches the Refugee Convention, again, as we've heard. Article 31 prohibits people seeking protection from being penalised for illegal entry, provided they present themselves to authorities without delay and show good cause for their action. Failing to facilitate naturalisation is a form of penalty. The Refugee Council estimates that at least 71,000 refugees who have already been granted status, could be affected by the changes to the Good Character Guidance and would therefore find themselves outside the legal protections that the Convention has sought to enshrine. So, as I hope my words have expressed, this change builds an unfair level of inequity into the system, which will have ramifications for other policy areas as well. Building on the hostile environment does have a real human cost, which I think it's our duty to understand fully and articulate clearly. Many of us listening in today share the fact that we are people of faith. So, as you'd expect from a bishop, it's my Christian faith that compels me to seek justice, love mercy, while walking humbly through these complex issues. Both the Jewish and the Christian tradition share this notion of a divine instruction to treat outsiders with kindness and dignity, as we heard from David. And that is as radical today as it's always been. And those seeking refuge should be loved and accepted as if they were native born. The ability to integrate fully as a citizen is, I believe, an integral part of this. So I conclude with words from Together for Refugees. Citizenship is not just a legal status, it is a tangible fulfillment of the promise of safety, dignity, and opportunity.